안녕하세요. 저는 저는 선생님이다. Hello, my name is Anthony Lentz, and today I will be your teacher. Today, we will be learning about the Korean alphabet known as Hangul. Before we start learning about Hangul and its history, we will first begin with a brief history of alphabets in general. Around 1080 BCE, the Phoenician alphabet became the first known phonemic script. It spread throughout the Middle East as well as Greece due to the Phoenicians' wide Mediterranean trading empire. The Greeks adopted this alphabet as their own and developed it to fit their needs. Since Latin as well as Cyrillic have roots in Greek, this makes the Phoenician alphabet the basis of all European languages, and languages in the Middle East, such as Arabic and Hebrew, have roots in Phoenician as well. Before we can begin to understand Korean as a written language, it is important that we first have a basis of Korean as a spoken language. It is believed to be related to the Altaic languages of Mongolia, though no close relationship can be formed. Therefore, Korean itself is a language isolate. It follows a subject-object-verb word order and has conjugations of verbs and adjectives based on the status of people you're talking to. It also contains particles such as subject particles, object particles, and others in order to determine where the relation of each noun is in a sentence. For a long period of time, the Koreans had no way to write down their language. This, however, changed when the Chinese conquered the Chosun dynasty around 108 BCE. Chinese then became the official written language of Korea. During the Shida dynasty, the Koreans had trouble developing their own culture due to Chinese being the only written language. It worked for the Chinese, however it didn't suit the local writing system. Chinese follows a subject-verb-object word order. Korean follows a subject-object-verb word order. Chinese has different particles to Korean and does not have conjugations based on status. So what the Koreans began to do was created rules to represent a word either as a Chinese character sharing its sound or meaning. As Koreans became more familiar with Chinese characters, they began to experiment to try to represent their language through these characters, also known as Hanja. Idu was the use of special particles and verb endings to better represent the spoken language. Idu can also be used as a general umbrella term of the use of Hanja during this time period. Hyangchal, another way of using Hanja, are Chinese characters that are given a Korean reading based on Chinese pronunciation. So if you have a word that sounds similar in Chinese and Korean, even if they do not have the same meaning, you would use that character in Korean, pronounce it the Korean way, and give it the Korean meaning. And this was used in transcribing Korean language into Hanja. The final one, 고열, was loosely translated as phrase parting, since you take Chinese phrases, you add special characters, and you change the word order from the Chinese subject-verb-object to the Korean subject-object-verb. And this was mainly used in transcribing written Chinese into Korean. These uses of Hanja worked somewhat well. However, it was mainly only educated, rich males who were able to learn and spend the time learning Chinese characters. This all changed with the advent of Sejong the Great, one of only 2 Korean rulers to get the Great suffix. This was well deserved, as Sejong the Great was a pretty cool guy. His reign was associated with progressive government, economic development, and scientific and technological innovation. And one important thing to note about Sejong was that he cared about the peasant class. And one of his most important and well-known achievements was the creation of Hangul around 1443 and 1444. So as I said, only the rich, well-educated males knew how to read and write Chinese characters. Everyone else could not write. They did not have the time or money to be able to spend learning all those Chinese characters, especially since Chinese did not well reflect the Korean language. And this is important because no one besides the wealthy could write records, keep records, especially for agriculture. And one of the most important was that no one was able to write complaints to the government. Sejong, on the other hand, wanted an easy language for the lower class to be able to express themselves. He worked with his scholars to develop 훈민정음, meaning the correct sounds for the instruction of the people. This became known as Hangul, and it was met with great opposition by the wealthy, but eventually it became the most widely used alphabet in Korea. Now that we have a basic understanding of the history of written Korean and Hangul, now we move on to the actual alphabet and learning how to read and write. Fortunately, Korean is known as being one of the easiest languages to learn to read and write. This lends itself well because both North and South Korea have a 99% literacy rate. And there is a Korean proverb stating, "A wise man can learn it in a morning, and a stupid man can learn it in the space of 10 days. And fortunately for you, I will not be going into anything other than Hangul, one of the easiest parts of learning Korean. And I should know. In essence, the Hangul alphabet consists of 24 letters. This is 14 consonants, as you can see on the chart here, 1-1. These are the basic consonants. You have 10 vowels, represented here in 1-2, the 10 vowels. As well, double consonants and diphthongs. The diphthongs are represented in 1-3, and we will get to the double consonants. They exist, but are not technically considered part of the alphabet. As we move on to consonants, you will notice I placed an IPA chart listing all of the Korean consonants in here. One important thing to note is that in Korean, there is no distinction between voiced and unvoiced consonants. In English, we have p and b, but in Korean, that distinction is not made. The distinction is made between a plain, tense, and aspirated forms. As I begin to teach you the Korean consonants, one important thing that I will mention is that I will be making the consonant sounds followed by the ah vowel sound. In bilabial nasal, we have ma. Bilabial stop affricate plain, ba. Stop affricate tense, ba. Aspirated, ba. Now we move on to the alveolar sounds. I will mention that each of these consonant sounds will be followed by the ah vowel sound. Alveolar nasal, na. Alveolar stop affricate plain, ta. Alveolar stop affricate tense, ta. Alveolar stop affricate aspirated, ta. Alveolar fricative, plain or aspirated, sa. Or in the case of when the S romanization is pronounced before an I sound, it becomes a shi sound. Alveolar fricative tense, sa. Alveolar liquid, da. One important thing to note about this is that it is somewhere between an L and an R sound. It is not L or R, it is somewhere in between. Now we move on to palatal, and as I have been doing for the other consonants, each consonant will be followed by the a vowel sound. Palatal stop affricate plain, ja. Palatal stop affricate tense, ja. Palatal stop affricate aspirated, cha. Okay, second to last, the velar sounds. And as with the other ones, they will be followed by an a sound. Velar nasal, this one is a special case. When written in Korean, this consonant, if written at the beginning, makes no sound and is used as a way to start with a vowel sound. So in this case, it would be a. However, when it is at the end of a block, it makes an ng sound. So in the same case, if you have it at the end, ang. Velar stop and affricate, ka. Velar stop and affricate tense, ga. Velar stop and affricate aspirated, ka. And now we end off our consonants with the glottal fricative h sound. One thing to note about this is that when Sejong first created Hangul, there was a double H, but since it was very hard to distinguish between the normal, it was removed, and in modern Korean, you do not pronounce the double H, it is just ha. One of the beautiful things about Hangul, since Sejong was a linguist himself, he wanted to make the language as intuitive as possible. So, the general shape of the consonants relate to the shape of the mouth when pronouncing them. With the velar ka sound, it makes the shape of the tongue, and the alveolar na sound, you have the tongue touching the roof of the mouth, making that shape. The dental s sound, you have the tip of the tongue going to the bottom of the lip. The bilabial sound, that square-ish shape, is the space between the lips. The glottal sound and h sound are supposed to represent the throat. And as I said in the last slide, letters such as ka, ka, and ga are pronounced relaxed, aspirated, and tense, respectively. And many Koreans, when pronouncing these, have a pitch change in their voice depending on the letter, with the ka sound being the lowest, ka sound being in the middle, and ga at the top. Now that we have a base understanding of consonants, now we move on to learning vowels. There are 6 basic vowels, as well as 4 other vowels. You can see here that I have the basic vowels placed on an IPA chart here. Those basic vowels are a, o, e, o, u, and u. And for the vowels with lines on them, if you add a line, it adds the y sound to it. So romanized, these are pronounced ya, yo, yo, and you. And also on the IPA chart here, we have 2 of the diphthongs, but we will get to that in the next slide. Diphthongs can be one of the harder aspects of learning Hangul, but being Hangul, it is not too complex. Diphthongs, also known as gliding vowels, occur when there is a transition from one vowel to another in the same syllable. These first 2 are the most widely used. They are romanized as e and a, respectively, but there's no pronunciation difference when you're speaking. Historically, they were pronounced differently, but if you ask a modern Korean, they will not make a distinction. An example of this is in the word for dog, ke, and the word for crab, ke. That's how you pronounce it historically, but nowadays, people will know what you're talking about if you say ke. The other diphthongs can be easily remembered as basic math between the other vowels. U and E pronounce as we. U and O pronounce wo. O and E, we. O and A, wa. O and E, we. So when you're looking at them, you can see the combination of these 2 vowels. Although it sounds somewhat different, in time you will be able to remember these. Now that we've gone through consonants, vowels, and diphthongs, now we get into the real meat and potatoes of this issue, block structures. These are very important if you want to be able to read and write Korean. So the basics are each syllable is represented by a block that typically has 2 or 3 letters. They are read left to right, top to bottom. Each block must start with a consonant, have a vowel in the middle, and end with a consonant if there is one. One of the biggest portions of this is how the shape of the block structure is formed. They are formed based on horizontal vowels, o, and u, or vertical vowels, I, A, and O. So if you have a horizontal vowel, you will have the first consonant on top, then under that, the vowel, and if there is one, the third consonant, and all form a stack. However, if you have a vertical, your first consonant will be to the left, and then to its right, you will have the vowel, and if there's no third consonant, you can just leave it at that. But if there is a third consonant, it will be placed in the center below those two, consonant and vowel. Good. Now we are finished with our basics of Hangul, history, and the alphabet itself. I hope you learned a lot. If you have any questions on Hangul, how to pronounce something, how to read or write, do not be afraid to ask. This is if you want to continue learning Korean, it's going to take a lot of time. The pronunciations are especially difficult, but in time you will be able to pronounce them. It is very easy to read, and everything gets a bit more difficult, but it's worth it in the end. And if you want to know my favorite Korean food, I would tell you pajeon, which is a Korean scallion pancake, which I enjoy a lot with the pajeon sauce, a little soy sauce, some pepper flakes, a little bit of honey. Oh, okay, I'm getting hungry. But so are you ready to play some Kahoot? So the basic format of this is you will have a Korean chart detailing all the diphthongs, all the consonants, all the vowels, and you will be able to look at them, see the romanization, and on the screen I will show you a Korean character of a loan word from English, so don't worry, I'm not throwing you in the deep end. You will be able to hopefully parse out what this word is based on the reading. So, 3, 2, 1, let's go. Just a little something I want to add at the end here. If you want to continue learning Korean, if this intrigued you, I wholly recommend you do. It is a fascinating language and is in high demand. If you want to learn Korean for free, or if you don't have the opportunity to find a class, I recommend these two bottom sites here. How to Study Korean. It has many lessons. They start with the basics, with lesson 0, and I'm using that right now, and it is very good, and they have videos to go along with them to help with dictation, with being able to read, being able to write. And the second one right here, this is the Cyber University of Korea. You can sign up for free, and they have quick Korean lessons where you can learn phrases, as we learned in LAN, is that chunks sometimes are one of the best ways to learn. And this one has learning different chunks based on ordering food, saying hello, and other things like that. So if you want to continue learning Hangul, actually going on to learn Korean, these two are the sites that I recommend the most for that. Thank you for listening, and goodbye.